Hello dear friends and followers, it's me again, and I'm making a voiceover video, woo! No, this one is not gonna be funny unfortunately, as I would like to discuss the cursed update from KR, the balance patch, quote-unquote balance patch. The CP adjustments on some supports, more specifically healers and Aishas. If you have no clue what's going on, basically KOG decided to take measurements against support characters and making healers scale of CP as well as Aishas. And this might sound like a good idea because, you know, some people might think of this, hey, I mean, I'm gearing up, right? I'm getting higher CP, so why should I do the same thing as a 1 mil CP player and so on and so on. But this in fact was so badly executed, I can't even say it was a good idea in general. It sounds really good on paper, but in practice it's probably going to be pretty damn bad. And yeah, in this video I'm going to talk about why exactly I think this is going to be bad and what are the, I guess, positives of this whole thing. But I'm not used to making rant videos because I don't like complaining too much. But this is something that I think deserves some attention or to be talked about because it's a relatively important issue, and I feel like a lot of people will find something to agree with me, as even the people that talk to that are kinda opposed against these ideas, or most of them, did agree to some extent and said that, hey, these opinions and things that KOG has been doing recently are pretty damn questionable and just as a whole is kinda cursed, basically. So yeah, let's get straight to the video, shall we? So let's talk about who actually got affected. We have healers, Blue Hen, Radiant Soul, and Nyx Pieta, and to a certain extent, this wasn't that bad. Blue Hen can still function very well at 2 million CP, which is a slightly higher than 1.5. Radiant Soul is a bit worse than that and needs 2.8 to get her previous healing, which is a bit of a problem for some people, I guess. Nyx Pieta still has his burst healing, so he's relatively okay-ish. But still, genuinely speaking, could probably have better scaling. I really don't like his scaling. I really don't. I'm sorry. Don't hate me. And Aishas. Metamorphy and Itisage. Aishas. Yeah. Let that sink in for a moment. Of all the things they could nerf, they nerf Aisha support, which isn't even the best anymore. Not Celestia, not Code Essentia, not Apsara, not Empire Sword, not even Animos. They just make Aisha scale of CP. The only damage buffs scaling of CP are Aisha buffs. Let that sink in for a moment again. And think about it. Yeah, that's what kind of enraged the whole community. Thank you for watching my video. You know, see you later. No, I'm joking. But I mean, what else do you want me to say over this? So basically, let me just put it into this perspective. You have a class such as Itisage, right? A class that clearly does need some good Kiowa changes to function better. Her Icicle Spear still misses quite a lot, right? It's pretty inconsistent in some dungeons and at some bosses. Playing Trosh and trying to hit Icicle Spear from the front is kind of annoying. And she doesn't do that much damage either. Her damage is arguably the lowest in the whole game right now, and she's in a kind of very bad spot. But because she had her magical buff, she was still very well usable in basically in raid, right? And even in normal content, as a player that doesn't have good gear, you could still probably brute force things with the extra 30+% magical damage. Especially in Hanier, because in dungeons it doesn't matter that much, but for bossy content, it certainly did a lot, and people were still favoring Itisage over certain other supports. And same goes for Metamorphy, even though Metamorphy has the capability of actually being a DPS compared to Itisage with like not so high investment, but genuinely speaking, it just makes no sense as a whole. Like, why would you make two characters scale of damage buffs in the whole game, scale of CP for damage buffs? There's only 2 characters, and these 2 One being the worst character in the whole game, and the other character being again an Aisha, and also got some minor nerfs to her buffs, which is absolutely nonsensical. And I don't really understand what went through their heads when they like looked at the patch and they were like, oh, so Item Stage needs adjustments for her damage, right? Let's make her buff skill of CP. And like, why? I don't really know. I feel like this game has given up on new players at this point, because people are like, oh, but like, why do you know, like, there are no new players, why would you, like, make Item Stage have the buff at, like, level 10, you know, let's say. And yeah, I mean, that's a good point, because this game doesn't have that many new players, but imagine if you had a new player, and the new player just comes into the game, opens the game, right? Picks Item Stage and goes and gets level 15 or level 20. I'm actually not sure when Wisdom Aura is like available. I did say level 10, but that's kind of like, you know, not very good because she gets it when she advances her jobs. And let's say she's low level, and now she's like, oh, I want to check what buffs does my class have, and they go and they're like, oh, 3% magical attack. And, you know, that kind of gives off pretty bad vibes of the class already. Like, I mean, if you look at Eve's normal, like, Eve's a base buff, right? 17+%. And then you look at Aisha and you're like, oh, that's just 3%, right? And of course, this gives off the vibe of the game being pay to win, because the game is partially pay to win. Because you just can't get chlorides for free. I mean, if somebody wants to grind several thousands of hours of Trosh and get 5% chloride seeds each 1,000 hours, then I guess yes. Otherwise, it's pretty unrealistic to like, you know, think of this game as completely free to play. But yeah, I think this is the major issue, and honestly speaking, it is a huge issue because, well, it doesn't really solve any problems. And I'm going to tell you one more thing outside Aisha's with the support scaling with the healers, right? I also think that one doesn't solve any issues, and I'll tell you why in a moment. And another thing, so again, why didn't they make everybody skill of CP if they wanted to do this, right? Like, why only specific healers and Aishas when Aishas are not the top support anymore? I guess the answer is nobody knows, and nobody probably ever will, unless they actually do decide to patch this. So let's give them some time, I guess. I'm not sure how much time they need, but yeah, let me explain what I meant before. So now the part where I talk about why this update is probably going to be more detrimental than helpful. And in a sense, I do agree that this update could be helpful, because there are people who really do quote-unquote leech on alts. They are 1.5 million CP and do exactly the same thing as mains with 4 mil CP. And so some people might be like, hey, but if you have like 4 mil CP as an Aisha, right, you get better buff, right? So like it makes you automatically better and taking over 1.5 million CP classes, right? Or well, I have to say just specifically, right? Hard to say actually. Well, look at it this way, and I'll say it again. Why is not everything scale of CP, right? Why only Aisha specifically? Why take 4 million CP Aisha when you can take 1.5 million CP Celestia? And no one's gonna care about that, right? You will only complain about classes that are not Celestial and Xpieta and have 1.5 million CP. On Blue Hen and PO probably. And Sakota Sensia, but like, you know, it's kind of, I feel like it's going to create more elitism that is going to help. It cacks new players, it cacks alts, and the problem is that you do need alts to farm your VOS. Well, truth to be told, you don't really, but as somebody who spent 7 months getting the weapon, and I have a friend who spent 10 months getting the weapon, not having an alt, or at least 2 or 3 even, is a huge disadvantage. You're going to take very long. And it's not just the VOS, it's also the accessories. They're not really that necessary, but you know, having them is pretty cool after all. Soul Crown still gives some damage increase as long as you're not overcapped adaptation, right? But you're just not gonna get them early unless you're really lucky with one character. Like my main didn't really get the Soul Crown. It's like the main character, right? And I've been raiding for over 10 months now too, right? It's just not really, like, unless you're lucky, it's not realistic either. And not to mention that the whole soul mark system is based on clearing alts. So now if you make every alt scale of CP and so on, right, it's going to be harder to farm marks. And there are going to be people like, hey, but what about the farm parties? I can't farm because I play Cult Sariel, right? Like, that could be me, right? And one thing I'm going to tell you is that I really don't think that people are going to go and farm on Celestia or Nyxes that have, what, like 1.5 million CP and +9 FOJs for black and white. Simple as that. Why would you need it if you are not going to play the character, right? Like, if you want to be an actual main, then I guess it doesn't matter, because that just cuts the whole point of this thing, right? They want to get rid of alts. But for farming, even having, like, 4 mil CP Cult Sariel, right? Like me, I'm 4 mil CP and I deal some damage. It's not going to help me out in the farming, in the long run. Even if they nerf ice shots, even if they nerf the supports, like healing, right? It's not going to help me, simply because there's still Celestias, Nyx Pietas, Prime Operators, Blue Hands, Apsaras, Empire Swords, and all other classes which have much better support capabilities than me. It's not going to help me out that they nerf ice shots, right? Like, ice shot's not even a problem anymore. Having 1.5 million CP Aisha in your party is just not a problem. Like, there are some people that are gonna argue that, hey, Aisha is so broken that she needs nerfs because her buff is so great and all she does is just tap one button. And so, again, to an extent I agree with you, but Ida Sage's damage output is just low, right? At least let her have the buff. Why not complain about Celestia as a utility? Celestia literally breaks the game, and what they do is nerf his damage reduction to 80%, which will still very likely enable to avoid the mechanics, right? Still, his Aquarius is still 30%. It's still there. It exists, right? And, like, even Nyx Pieta's support, all he did was getting nerfs on his healing. Like, his debuffs are still there. They still exist. No one will really take my 4 mil CP Sariel over a 4 mil CP Nyx Pieta if it came to it when it comes to the main farming, simply because the main issue is not the alts. The main issue is the fact that some classes have so insane support that the other classes get neglected because of that. And yes, I can go and make my own party, which is like what I've been doing for now, but it just feels very like elitist, right? Like, oh, now everybody has to be Celestia, Nyx Pieta, PO. Actually, Tempest Buster I haven't mentioned, you know, to farm the raid kinda if you want to, like, you know, get into the faster parties. And I just don't like the whole idea of KOG trying to fix this issue by pointing it like, oh, you have lots of Aisha out on the, like, raid board and KR, right? So now let's nerf Aisha specifically, not Celestias. And it's kind of silly, because I don't want every character to now be Celestia, right? Just because Celestia's broken, that doesn't mean everybody should be broken. I don't really know, because this doesn't really have a good solution. One of the solutions would be to just make everybody scale CP, you know, and give the caster the best version of their buff. Which would make sense, because it wouldn't cack them in the long run. It would let them to do the solo content just fine, like they did now. And it wouldn't give the feeling of game being paid to win, because even if you had to get CP to support your friend, you could still have enough CP to, like, do Henir for yourself. You would have the high buff enough to, like, buff yourself in dungeon and Henir. Even if it doesn't matter too much, then, like, still, why cack them in that content? It just makes no sense whatsoever. So, yeah, I don't really get it. I don't understand the whole process, the thinking process of KOG. I don't really understand where the game is heading right now. What are the next steps they're going to take? Like, if they did really nerf the supports, like all of them, make them scale by CP, then it would still suck, but it would be, like, okay-ish in a sense. Like, if they made Celestia's MP from Luminai's natal chart scale of CP, or, like, the natal chart in general, right? Then, sure, I guess, it would make Celestia not as good anymore, but Celestia has cooldown Axel, Celestia has MP, and probably better healing than Nyx now, right? Which is ridiculous. Not that Nyx is weak or whatever, but at least on the, like, the lowest level, I guess, his healing is better, because of the, like, Nyx's scales really badly with CP, right? And he can block the bans, he still has magical attack, he has horary, which is just so overloaded. Like, this class itself, Noah's release, it was a huge just downfall in terms of, like, raids being just more and more elitist. And again, I don't really blame anybody for wanting Celestia and Nyx in their farming parties because they're just so good that not having them will just make it much worse. Like for normal clears, I think wanting them like every single time is a bit Pepega, but for just farming, I understand because of how overloaded they are. Like insanely overloaded compared to a lot of other classes. Same with PO right now, right? And that really sucks because that just means that classes that don't give the best buffs and classes that are not the best DPSers have harder times, dealing with endgame. And even if you can form your own party and stuff, it just makes you feel like, you know, um, it just doesn't feel very good. Like the whole design just doesn't feel good. Let's just put it this way. I don't really like it, and I'm also not going to get started on the things they've done prior to this update with the physical magical attack percent scaling that got like removed after a day because they've realized was horrible, and the fourth paths which are going to take 2 years to fully release. Eve's fourth path is soon, right? And may or might not clash change depending on what is she going to be, but I am partially looking forward for it and partially not. I have very mixed opinions of the game right now, and until they actually probably decide to like quote unquote fix some major core issues with the raids and stuff, I'm like taking a break right now. Like I'm breaking currently. I will want to make some video guides perhaps because want to help you players and stuff, and perhaps make a tutorial guide eventually, even though there's one already. But the current state of the game for me is just not very fun, and I can understand why there are people who are quitting over stuff like this. Even like, the players who don't play those classes and are not really directly affected. And I mean, again, I do understand them. I do understand people who like this update because they will feel they are more useful, right, when they have higher CP with better gear. But I understand people who also like have the gear, but like they just want to do more than just being a buffer. Like, well, specifically item stage players rather than other ones, because the other ones have some DPS capabilities, like I said already. Well, Radiant Soul could also use some of them, but you know how that one goes. So, and also the fact that you need 6.5 million CP on Aisha's to get the maximum buff or something. Like, I mean, on item stage it's kind of hard to achieve. Like, it's not impossible, but well, let's be real here. 6.5 is quite a high amount. If you can have a Celestia with 0 CP doing natal charting and like Hori, CDAMP, Gemini, Aquarius, Leo, whatever else, and you have a one character that surely just presses one button but just gives like nothing, right? Like rather give Vita Sage a support rotation if you really mind about her being a one button character. Sure, she has one button, but it doesn't really justify the nerfs, and just actually like just make her DPS character then if you don't want her to buff, right? Like they removed FP's buff, and that's fair because FP is a broken class, right? He can do a lot of damage, and that's just fair. Same with Centurion, they both do damage, right? Like they're removing the super armor from his DPS rotation for other classes is completely fine and understandable. Like, I mean, it is kind of annoying for parties to deal with, but it makes sense, But for Aisha's, it just doesn't. And even for, like, Radiant Soul, I have mixed opinions about it. But yeah, I did tell you the gist of, like, what I think is the problem. You may agree, you may not agree, or may agree to a certain extent, and it's completely fine. Just like, agree to disagree, right? If you think this update was great, sure, I'm not taking your opinion away, because the idea itself is pretty good. It hits what might be one of the issues, right? But the execution of the idea is just not there. It's just bad, and it sucks. It's just gonna screw up more players, demotivate new players from joining this game, and so on and so on. It's just not basically solving anything. It's just creating more problems, and that's bad. But I'm still going to stay positive and give them, like, quote-unquote, a chance. And maybe eventually, maybe next week, maybe a week after, maybe 2 weeks after, they might actually adjust it with a fourth pass too. And it would be great if they actually made Aisha's buff scale less, if not remove it completely, or made other classes scale as high. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I haven't said anything bad that would offend anybody. And if I did, I really apologize. I don't usually, like I said, make these types of videos. And hopefully you have a great day. See you guys in the next video, and I'm not sure when that's gonna be, but yeah, see you guys.